The lightning split the sky in half the moment. Eleanor Matthews stumbled through the mud at the edge of Pinon, New Mexico, her swollen belly pressing against her soaked dress as rain hammered down like bullets from heaven. 6 months pregnant and cast out by her own family 3 hours earlier, she had nowhere left to go except forward into the storm that seemed determined to wash her from the earth entirely. Her father's final words still echoed in her ears, crueler than any thunder. "No daughter of mine carries a bastard child under my roof." The man who had promised her marriage had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby, leaving her alone with the consequences of their love. Eleanor's legs gave out near what looked like a barn, her hands sinking into the cold mud as she gasped for breath. The rain was so thick she could barely see 3 feet ahead, and the wind tore at her hair with vicious intent. She tried to stand, but her body refused, exhaustion and despair weighing her down more effectively than any chains. This was how it would end, she thought distantly. Both of them would die out here in the storm, forgotten and unloved. Miss, can you hear me?" A man's voice cut through the roar of the rain, and suddenly there were hands on her shoulders, strong and warm despite the cold. "I've got you. Hold on now." Eleanor looked up through the rain streaming down her face and saw a cowboy kneeling beside her, his dark hat doing little to shield his concerned face from the storm. He was young, maybe 25, with brown eyes that held genuine worry as they took in her condition. "My barn's just here," he said, already lifting her with surprising gentleness. "Can you walk if I help you?" She managed a nod, and together they staggered the remaining distance to the barn. He kicked the door open and got her inside out of the punishing rain. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Eleanor sank onto a pile of hay, shaking violently from cold and fear and the crushing weight of everything that had happened. The cowboy lit a lantern with practiced efficiency, and warm light flooded the space. Eleanor could see him properly now. He had kind features, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and broad shoulders that spoke of hard work. His clothes were soaked through, same as hers, but he seemed unconcerned with his own comfort as he grabbed a horse blanket from a nearby stall. "Here," he said, draping it around her shoulders. "You're freezing. Let me get you something dry." "I don't have anything," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't have anything at all." He paused, really looking at her for the first time, and his gaze dropped to her rounded belly before returning to her face. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like anger, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. "Put you out in a storm like this?" "My family." The words came out bitter. "My father said I shamed them, that I had to leave." The cowboy's jaw tightened and he shook his head slowly. "That's not right. That's not right at all." He moved to a trunk in the corner and pulled out a shirt and some worn pants. "These will be too big, but they're dry. There's a stall in the back where you can change. I'll turn around and tend to my horse." Eleanor took the clothes with trembling hands and made her way to the stall he indicated. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her sodden dress, and it took her 3 tries to get them undone. The dry clothes felt like heaven against her skin, even if the shirt hung on her like a tent, and she had to roll the pants up several times. When she emerged, the cowboy was brushing down a beautiful sorrel mare, murmuring to the animal in low, soothing tones. "Thank you," Eleanor said, and he turned to face her. "I'm Vincent Garrett," he said, extending his hand. "This is my family's ranch. Well, mine now. My folks passed 2 years back. Eleanor Matthews." She took his hand, surprised by the calluses she felt there. A working man's hand. "You're safe now, both of you," Vincent said, and the certainty in his voice made something tight in Eleanor's chest loosen just a fraction. "I won't let anything happen to either of you, you hear me? Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes, and she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness. Vincent cleared his throat and gestured toward the barn door, where the storm still raged. "This'll likely go on all night. My house is about 100 yards from here, but I don't want to risk taking you out in this again. We can wait it out here. I've got some supplies in the tack room, including some food if you're hungry." Eleanor realized she was starving. She had not eaten since breakfast, and that had only been a piece of bread she managed to steal before her father discovered her packed bag and realized she was planning to leave on her own terms. "I am hungry," she admitted. Vincent smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Good. A woman in your condition needs to eat." He disappeared into the tack room and returned with a canteen, some jerky, and an apple. "Not much, but it's something. Tomorrow I'll make you a proper meal." They sat together on hay bales while the storm hammered against the barn walls. Eleanor ate slowly, savoring each bite while Vincent watched with satisfaction. The lantern light cast dancing shadows across the barn, and despite everything, Eleanor felt safer than she had in months. "How far along are you?" Vincent asked after a while, his voice gentle. 6 months, Eleanor replied. "The baby moves now. I can feel it kicking." "That must be something," Vincent said, and there was wonder in his voice. "I've helped birth foals and calves, but never been around a woman expecting before." Eleanor found herself smiling despite everything. "It is something. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps me going, knowing there's this little person depending on me." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, "The father, is he coming back?" "No," Eleanor's voice was flat. "He made that clear. He said he was not ready to be tied down, that I should have been more careful." The bitterness crept back in. "As if it takes only one person to make a child." "He's a coward and a fool," Vincent said with conviction. "Any man who walks away from his responsibilities is not worth your tears." "I'm not crying for him," Eleanor said, realizing it was true. "Not anymore. I cried enough for him already. Now I just cry for myself and my baby, wondering what kind of life we'll have." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and looked at her seriously. "Listen, Eleanor. I don't know you and you don't know me, but I know what it's like to be alone in this world. After my folks died, I had nobody. This ranch was all I had left of them, and I've been working it by myself for 2 years. It's hard, lonely work." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "What I'm trying to say is, you're welcome to stay here. At least until you figure out what you want to do. I've got a spare room in the house, and Lord knows I could use help around the place. I can't pay much, but I can offer you room and board and a safe place for your baby to be born." Eleanor stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Vincent said simply. "And because nobody should be alone in this world, especially not when they're bringing a new life into it." Fresh tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, but these were different from the ones she had cried before. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Vincent said with another one of those transforming smiles. "Say you'll stay, at least for now." "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." The storm finally broke around dawn, leaving the world washed clean and bright. Vincent led Eleanor to the house, a modest wooden structure with a covered porch and windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. Inside, it was simple but clean, with evidence of a woman's touch lingering in the curtains and the quilt on the back of the sofa. "My mother made most of the decorations," Vincent explained, seeing Eleanor looking around. "I haven't had the heart to change much." "It's lovely," Eleanor said, meaning it. After months of feeling unwelcome in her own family's home, this place felt warm despite being unfamiliar. Vincent showed her to the spare room, which had a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking what she could now see was a substantial ranch. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see a chicken coop and a vegetable garden that looked well tended. "Get some rest," Vincent said. "I've got work to do, but I'll check on you later. If you need anything, just holler." Eleanor slept deeply for the first time in months, and when she woke, the sun was high in the sky. She could hear sounds from outside, the lowing of cattle and the rhythmic sound of an axe splitting wood. She rose and smoothed down the borrowed clothes, then ventured out to find Vincent. He was indeed chopping wood, his shirt off despite the morning chill, muscles flexing with each swing of the axe. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm and looked away quickly, reminding herself that this man was her benefactor, nothing more. She had no business noticing the way the sun caught in his dark hair or how capable his hands looked gripping the axe handle. Vincent spotted her and set down the axe, grabbing his shirt and pulling it on. "You're up. Good. I was about to start on lunch. Hope you like stew because that's about all I know how to make." Eleanor followed him into the house and found herself naturally gravitating toward helping. She set the table while he worked at the stove, and soon they were sitting down to a meal that was simple but hearty. Vincent had not been exaggerating about his cooking skills, but Eleanor had eaten far worse, and she told him so. "I can cook," she offered. "If you want. I'm pretty good at it, actually. My mother taught me before." She trailed off, "Before she let your father throw you out." Vincent finished, and there was that anger again, controlled but present. "I'd appreciate the help with cooking if you're feeling up to it, but only if you're feeling well enough. You need to rest too." Over the following days, they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Eleanor took over the cooking and the cleaning, grateful to have something to occupy her hands and mind. Vincent worked the ranch, rising before dawn and often not coming in until after dark. Despite his long hours, he always made time to check on her, asking how she was feeling and if the baby had been active. Eleanor found herself looking forward to these moments more than she should. Vincent was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that often caught her off guard and made her laugh. He told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his parents who had emigrated from Kansas to start a new life in New Mexico territory back in 1868. They had built this place from nothing, he said with pride, and he was determined to honor their memory by keeping it running. "My father always said this land could be unforgiving, but it was honest," Vincent said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "It gives back what you put into it, no more and no less." "That's more than most people do," Eleanor observed, thinking of her own father's conditional love. Vincent glanced at her. "You want to talk about what happened with your family?" Eleanor wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It was late October now, and the evenings were growing cool. "Not much to tell that you haven't already guessed. I was foolish. I fell in love with a man who said all the right things, and I believed him. When I told him about the baby, he said he had business in Texas and left the next day. Never came back. My father found out a month later when I could not hide it anymore, and he said I was a disgrace. My mother cried but did not stand up for me. My brother called me names I won't repeat. And then the storm came, and my father said it was a sign from God that I should leave before I brought more shame on the family. So he sent you out into it," Vincent said, his voice hard, "into a storm that could have killed you." "I think that might have been the point," Eleanor said quietly. "Easier than having to explain to the neighbors where I went." Vincent stood abruptly and paced to the edge of the porch, his hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry that happened to you. You deserved better. You and your baby both deserve better." "Well, we found it," Eleanor said, surprised by the truth in her own words. "We found you." Vincent turned to look at her, and something passed between them in that moment, something that made Eleanor's heart beat faster. But then Vincent cleared his throat and looked away, and the moment passed. As November arrived and the weather grew colder, Eleanor noticed changes in how Vincent looked at her. His gaze would linger a moment too long, or his hand would brush hers when passing dishes at dinner, and electricity would spark between them. She told herself she was imagining it, that a man like Vincent would never be interested in a pregnant woman carrying another man's child. But her heart began to hope anyway, foolish as that might be. One morning, Eleanor woke to find the world transformed by the first snow of the season. She stood at the window, marveling at the way it blanketed everything in white, making the ranch look like something from a storybook. She felt the baby kick, strong and insistent, and placed her hand over the movement. "Your first snow," she whispered. "Not that you can see it yet." "Everything all right?" Vincent's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway of the kitchen, concern on his face. "Fine," she assured him. "The baby's just being active this morning." Vincent hesitated, then said, "Could I? Would you mind if I felt it?" "The kicking, I mean. I've never felt such a thing before." Eleanor's breath caught, but she nodded and reached for his hand, placing it on the side of her belly where the baby was moving. They stood there in the quiet morning light, Vincent's hand warm against her, waiting. And then the baby kicked, hard enough that Vincent's eyes went wide with wonder. "That's incredible," he breathed. "There's really a whole person in there." "There really is," Eleanor said, and realized she was crying again, but these were happy tears. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything. For taking us in, for giving us a home, for caring." Vincent's other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not frighten you off." Her heart was pounding. "What is it?" "I have feelings for you," Vincent said, the words coming out rushed. "I know I should not. I know you're expecting another man's child and that you've been through so much, but I cannot help it. These past weeks with you here, they've been the happiest I've had since my parents died. You make this house feel like a home again. You make me want to be better, to do better. And I find myself thinking about a future where you and the baby stay, where we're a family together." Eleanor stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You want that? Even though this baby is not yours? That baby will be mine in every way that matters if you'll let me be a father to him or her," Vincent said fiercely. "Blood does not make a family, Eleanor. Love does. And I love you. I know it's fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I could not keep it inside anymore." "Vincent," Eleanor whispered, her own hands coming up to grip his shirt. "I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself I'm just grateful, but it's more than that. You're good and kind and strong, and you've shown me what real love looks like. Not the empty promises I got before, but actual love through action and care." Vincent's smile was brilliant, and then he was kissing her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. The baby kicked between them as if in approval, and they both laughed against each other's lips. "Marry me," Vincent said. "I know we should probably wait, do things proper, but I don't want to wait. I want you to be my wife. I want that baby to have my name. I want us to be a real family." "Yes," Eleanor said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They rode into Pinyon 2 days later. Eleanor bundled warmly against the cold and found the circuit preacher who passed through once a month. He was a kindly older man named Reverend Walsh, who did not bat an eye at Eleanor's obvious pregnancy or ask uncomfortable questions. Instead, he smiled and said he had seen stranger things in his 30 years riding the territory, and that love was love regardless of how it came about. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with 2 witnesses pulled in from the general store next door. Eleanor wore a dress that Vincent had bought her from the dry goods store, simple blue calico that fit her changing shape. Vincent wore his best shirt and pants, and his hair was slicked back neatly. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Eleanor felt her heart might burst from happiness. They celebrated with dinner at the town's only restaurant, a modest establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Chen who served the best roast chicken Eleanor had ever tasted. Vincent held her hand across the table the entire meal, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, and Eleanor marveled at how quickly her life had transformed from desperate to joyful. Back at the ranch, which was now legally hers as much as his, Vincent carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests that she was too heavy in her current condition. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the room that had been his alone but was now theirs to share. "Are you sure about this?" Eleanor asked, sudden nerves overtaking her. "About all of it, more sure than I've ever been about anything," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You're my wife now, Eleanor Garrett, and that baby is going to be a Garrett too, our baby." That night they lay together in the darkness, Eleanor's back pressed against Vincent's chest, his hand resting protectively over her belly. The baby seemed to settle at his touch, as if recognizing the new presence in their lives. "I think the baby knows you," Eleanor murmured sleepily. "Good," Vincent said, his breath warm against her hair. "I want him or her to always know me, to never doubt that I'm their father." "You're already more of a father than the other man ever could have been," Eleanor said. "He might have helped create this baby, but you're the one who will be there for everything that matters." The winter deepened, and Eleanor's belly continued to grow. Vincent was attentive to every need, bringing her tea in the mornings and rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. He talked to the baby constantly, telling stories about the ranch and making promises about all the things they would do together. Eleanor fell more in love with him every day, amazed that this was her life now. In mid-December, Vincent came home with a wooden cradle he had been building in secret in the barn. It was beautifully crafted, with rockers that moved smoothly and little carved horses along the side. "Vincent, it's perfect," Eleanor said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "The baby will love it." "I hope so," Vincent said, looking pleased. "I want to give you both everything you need." "You already have," Eleanor assured him, "just by being you." Christmas came, and Vincent surprised Eleanor by bringing home a small pine tree that he set up in the corner of the living room. They decorated it with strings of popcorn and cranberries, and paper ornaments that Eleanor cut from old newspapers. On Christmas morning, Vincent gave her a music box he had ordered from a catalog, which played a soft lullaby when opened. Eleanor gave him a new shirt she had sewn from fabric she bought with egg money she had earned selling eggs in town, and his eyes grew suspiciously bright when he saw the careful stitches. "You made this for me," he said, wonder in his voice. "Of course I did," Eleanor said. "You're my husband." "Who else would I make shirts for?" Vincent pulled her into his arms, mindful of her belly between them. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Eleanor whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." January arrived with bitter cold and heavy snows that kept them mostly confined to the house. Vincent still had to tend the animals, but he never stayed out longer than necessary, always hurrying back to Eleanor. She was in her final month now, and every twinge made them both nervous. The nearest doctor was in Las Vegas, nearly 2 days' ride away, too far to reach if the baby came fast. Mrs. Chen's wife helped deliver half the babies in Pinyon, Vincent told Eleanor. "I already talked to her, and she said she'll come when your time arrives." "You thought of everything," Eleanor said, feeling grateful and also increasingly anxious as her due date approached. I'm trying, Vincent said, kissing her forehead. I just want you both to be safe. On a cold night in late January, Eleanor woke to a sharp pain that radiated from her back around to her belly. She lay there for a moment, wondering if it was just the baby moving, but then another pain came, stronger this time, and she knew. "Vincent," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Vincent, wake up, it's time." Vincent was on his feet in an instant, pulling on clothes and boots. "I'll go get Mrs. Chen. Will you be all right alone for a bit?" "Yes," Eleanor said, though fear was threading through her. "Just hurry." Vincent kissed her quickly and then was gone, and Eleanor could hear him saddling his horse in record time. The thunder of hoofbeats faded into the night, and Eleanor was alone with the pains that were coming faster now. She got herself to the kitchen and put water on to boil, remembering what little she knew about childbirth from whispered conversations with married women. The pains were intense but bearable, and she found that walking helped, so she paced the kitchen, one hand on her belly, talking to the baby. "It's all right, little one," she murmured. "Your father has gone to get help. We're going to be fine. You're going to be born into a house full of love with a father who cannot wait to meet you." Vincent returned in what felt like hours but was probably less than 45 minutes, Mrs. Chen following on her own horse. The older woman took charge immediately, her capable hands examining Eleanor with efficient gentleness. "First baby?" Mrs. Chen asked, and Eleanor nodded. "Well, you're doing fine, dear. These things take time, but everything seems to be progressing normally. Now, let's get you comfortable." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Vincent stayed by Eleanor's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her face with a cool cloth. He whispered encouragement in her ear, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. When the pain was worst, Eleanor squeezed his hand so hard she was afraid she might break bones, but Vincent never flinched, never pulled away. Finally, as dawn was breaking outside, Mrs. Chen said, "All right, Eleanor, the next pain you push with everything you have." Eleanor bore down with all her strength, and Vincent's hand was an anchor keeping her grounded. Once, twice, 3 times she pushed, and then suddenly there was a release of pressure and a thin, angry cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Mrs. Chen announced, holding up a squirming, red-faced infant. A healthy baby boy. Eleanor fell back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated, and Vincent was crying openly now, staring at the baby with awe. Mrs. Chen cleaned the infant quickly and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Eleanor's arms. "Hello, sweetheart," Eleanor whispered, looking down at her son. He had stopped crying and was looking around with dark, unfocused eyes. "Hello, little one. We're so glad you're here." "Can I hold him?" Vincent asked, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor carefully transferred the baby to Vincent's arms and watched as her husband looked down at their son with such love that it took her breath away. Vincent traced one finger down the baby's soft cheek, and the infant turned toward the touch instinctively. "He's perfect," Vincent said. "Eleanor, he's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names over the past months but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son cradled in Vincent's strong arms, Eleanor knew exactly what his name should be. "Thomas," she said. "After your father, Thomas Vincent Garrett." Vincent looked up at her, his eyes shining. "Are you sure?" "Completely sure," Eleanor said. "Your father would have loved him. This way he'll always carry that legacy." Mrs. Chen stayed for a few more hours, making sure both Eleanor and the baby were stable before riding back to town. She refused payment beyond a ham from the smokehouse, saying it was her pleasure to help bring new life into the world. After she left, Vincent brought Eleanor tea and toast, then sat beside the bed, unable to take his eyes off Thomas sleeping in the cradle he had made. "I can't believe he's really here," Vincent said softly. "Our son." "Our son," Eleanor agreed, loving the sound of those words. "Thank you, Vincent, for giving him your name, for being his father." "Thank you for trusting me with him," Vincent said. "With both of you, I promise I'll spend every day of my life making sure you never regret it." The next weeks were an adjustment as they learned to care for a newborn. Thomas was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in decent stretches, but he still required nearly constant attention. Vincent was amazingly helpful, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy so Eleanor could sleep. She would wake sometimes in the night to find Vincent standing by the window, the baby in his arms, pointing out the stars and telling his son about the ranch he would someday inherit. As winter gave way to spring, Thomas grew and changed, becoming more alert and responsive. His eyes, which had been dark and unfocused at birth, settled into a deep brown that reminded Eleanor of her own father's eyes. It was the only feature Thomas seemed to have inherited from that side of his parentage. Everything else, from his temperament to his expressions, seemed to mirror Vincent. "He's definitely a Garrett," Vincent's neighbor, Mr. Peterson, observed one day when he stopped by. He was an elderly rancher who had known Vincent's parents. "Got the same stubborn chin your father had, Vincent." Vincent grinned and bounced Thomas on his knee. "That's what I keep telling Eleanor. This boy is all Garrett through and through." Eleanor smiled, knowing that biology might say otherwise, but in every way that truly mattered, Thomas was Vincent's son. The man who had promised her father and then abandoned her was nothing more than a biological accident. Vincent was Thomas's real father, the one who had been there from before his birth, the one who would be there for everything to come. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch prospered. Vincent hired a hand named Jack to help with the cattle, which gave him more time to spend with Eleanor and Thomas. They would often pack a lunch and ride out together, Thomas secured in a sling against Eleanor's chest, to check the fences or move the cattle to fresh pasture. Eleanor loved these excursions, loved seeing Vincent in his element, and loved watching him interact with their son. Thomas was 6 months old when Eleanor realized she might be pregnant again. She waited to be sure, seeing the familiar signs in her body, before telling Vincent. When she finally did, over dinner one evening after putting Thomas to bed, Vincent's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "Another baby," he said, his face lighting up. "Eleanor, that's wonderful. Thomas is going to be a big brother." "I wanted to make sure you were happy about it," Eleanor said. "I know it's fast, and we have our hands full with Thomas already." Vincent came around the table and pulled her to her feet, kissing her soundly. "I'm thrilled. I want a whole house full of children with you." "Well, maybe not a whole houseful," he amended with a laugh, "but definitely more than one." This pregnancy was different from the first. Eleanor was not alone or afraid this time. She had Vincent by her side, supporting her through the morning sickness and the aches and pains. She had Thomas, who was a constant source of joy and distraction. And she had hope, real hope, for the future. In March of 1887, Eleanor gave birth to their second son, whom they named David. The birth was easier this time, faster and less frightening because Eleanor knew what to expect. Vincent was there again, holding her hand and offering encouragement, and when David made his entrance into the world, Thomas was sleeping peacefully in the next room, unaware that his life had just changed forever. David was a different baby than Thomas had been. Where Thomas had been calm and observant, David was active and vocal, letting everyone know when he was unhappy. Vincent joked that David had inherited Eleanor's stubbornness, which made Eleanor laugh because she knew that Vincent could be equally stubborn when he wanted to be. Thomas, now a year old and toddling around, was fascinated by his baby brother. He would pat David's head with surprising gentleness and bring him toys, even though David was too young to appreciate the gesture. Vincent would watch his sons with such obvious pride and love that it made Eleanor's heart swell. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted," Vincent told Eleanor one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Thomas play in the yard while David nursed. "A family, a real family. I used to think this ranch was enough, that the cattle and the land were all I needed. But I was just existing, not really living. You and the boys, you've made me come alive." "You saved us," Eleanor said quietly. "Thomas and me. If you had not found me that night in the storm, we would have died." "You gave us life, Vincent. Everything good in my world exists because you chose to care." Vincent took her free hand and brought it to his lips. "I love you, Eleanor Garrett. I'll love you until my dying day." "And I love you," Eleanor replied, "more than words can express." The years passed in a blur of happy chaos. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the ranch work. David was his opposite, full of mischief and laughter, always getting into something. In 1889, Eleanor gave birth to their first daughter, whom they named Rose after Vincent's mother. Rose had her father's brown eyes and her mother's blonde hair, and both boys doted on their little sister. The ranch continued to thrive under Vincent's management. He expanded the cattle operation and added horses, breeding quality animals that were sought after throughout the territory. Eleanor managed the household and started a garden that produced vegetables she sold in town, adding to their income. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. When Thomas was old enough to understand, Eleanor sat him down and told him the truth about his birth. She explained that there had been a man before Vincent, but that man had not wanted to be a father. She told him that Vincent had chosen him, had claimed him as his son from the very beginning, and that made Vincent his real father in every way that counted. Thomas listened carefully, his young face serious, and then said, "So Papa chose to love me?" "Yes," Eleanor said, her throat tight. "He did." "Then I choose to love him back," Thomas said simply. "He's my papa. Nothing else matters." When Eleanor told Vincent about the conversation later, he cried again the way he had when Thomas was born. "He's such a good boy," Vincent said. "They all are. We're so lucky, Eleanor." "We are," Eleanor agreed. "So very lucky." In 1891, their family was complete with the birth of another daughter whom they named Grace. She was a perfect baby, calm and sweet, and her brothers and sister immediately fell in love with her. Vincent would sit in his chair in the evenings with Grace in his arms, surrounded by his other children, and Eleanor would watch from the kitchen, marveling at the life they had built. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Thomas became Vincent's right hand, learning everything about ranching and proving himself to be naturally talented with both cattle and horses. David discovered a love for carpentry and started building things, from simple toys to elaborate furniture. Rose showed a gift for music, and Vincent bought her a piano from a family leaving New Mexico territory, which she practiced on daily. Grace was still young, but she already showed signs of being artistic, drawing pictures that covered the walls of her room. When Thomas turned 18 in 1895, Vincent officially made him a partner in the ranch. It was something they had discussed at length, and Eleanor was proud to see Vincent treating their son as an equal. David, now 16, was apprenticing with a furniture maker in Santa Fe, coming home on weekends to share his new skills. Rose, at 13, was talking about becoming a music teacher. Grace, at 9, was simply happy being the baby of the family, though she had started announcing that she wanted to be a painter when she grew up. One evening in the summer of 1896, Vincent and Eleanor sat on the porch alone, a rare occurrence with 4 children. The kids were all at a dance in town, David having driven them in the wagon. Eleanor leaned against Vincent's shoulder, feeling the peace of the moment settle over her. "Remember that night in the storm?" Vincent asked quietly. "When I found you." "I think about it all the time," Eleanor admitted. "How different my life would be if you had not been there." "I think about it too," Vincent said. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever met you. If I had been inside the house instead of checking on the horses, if I had not heard you fall, if the storm had been worse." He shook his head. "It does not bear thinking about." "But you were there," Eleanor said, turning to look at him. "You found me, and you saved me, and you loved me. You loved Thomas before he was even born, and you gave us a family and a home. Vincent, you're the best man I've ever known." "You make me want to be," Vincent said, kissing her softly. "You and the kids, you're my whole world." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together. In the distance, Eleanor could see the barn where Vincent had first brought her that stormy night 19 years ago. So much had changed since then. She had been a frightened, pregnant girl with no future. Now she was a wife, a mother, a partner in a successful ranch. She had 4 beautiful children and a husband who loved her more than she had ever dreamed possible. The sound of the wagon approaching broke the silence, and soon their children were spilling onto the porch, talking over each other about the dance, and who had been there and what songs the band had played. Thomas had apparently danced with a girl named Sarah, which his siblings teased him about mercilessly. David had gotten into an argument with another boy about carpentry techniques. Rose had played piano for the band when their regular player had to leave early. Grace had eaten too much cake and was feeling slightly ill. Eleanor gathered Grace onto her lap while Vincent listened to Thomas's protests about Sarah being just a friend. This was her life now, full and chaotic and absolutely perfect. She caught Vincent's eye over the children's heads, and he winked at her, his love evident in every line of his face. Later, after the children had gone to bed and the house was quiet again, Vincent and Eleanor lay together in the darkness of their room. His hand found hers under the quilts, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become second nature over the years. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered. "For what?" Vincent asked. "For everything. For finding me, for loving me, for building this life with me. For being the father our children needed, and the husband I never dared to dream of." Vincent pulled her closer, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he spoke. "I should be thanking you. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. You filled this house with love and laughter. You gave me children to pass this ranch on to. Eleanor, loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." Eleanor kissed him then, pouring 19 years of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. Outside, a storm was brewing, thunder rumbling in the distance. But inside, surrounded by the family they had created, Eleanor felt nothing but warmth and safety. The frightened girl who had stumbled through the mud in a storm so many years ago was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who was loved beyond measure, and who had found her home in the most unexpected of places. As rain began to patter against the windows, Eleanor thought about fate and second chances. She thought about the man who had abandoned her and his child, and realized she felt nothing for him now, not even anger. He had missed out on knowing the wonderful young man Thomas had become, and that was his loss, not theirs. Vincent had been Thomas's father in every way that mattered, and nothing could change that. "I love you," Eleanor murmured into the darkness. "I love you too," Vincent replied, his voice drowsy but content. Always have, always will. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms while the storm raged harmlessly outside. And in the morning, they would wake to a new day on their ranch, surrounded by their children, living the life they had built together from a moment of kindness in a storm. It was more than Eleanor had ever hoped for, more than she had ever dreamed possible. It was, quite simply, everything.